morning.
Good morning.
Actually, the thought when Darren reached out this time and said, could you come? There was a thought, well, that might be difficult, but we set it aside. And then it worked out so beautifully. We even were able to visit yesterday with Elect Star, who you had introduced us to on the pilgrimage. So she's still very much with us, and she would love to see you again.
Wow.
She remembers you. She remembers the interview and the article that you wrote. Children of Light, not far from here. So Easter Sunday, wow. Jesus' story really is our story. It seems as if to the limited aspect here, the wavy bit, as we could say, it seems to the limited aspect as if Jesus is out there, something separate from us. But we would suppose he never told us that he always said that we are one with him. Yes. And so the story of Jesus, how many have heard of Carl Jung? So Carl Jung, the great modern psychologist who really helped reintroduce us to the hero's journey, to this path that each of us are on. We could say back to that highest aspect of us, the Christ within us. I used to think, and I learned that this was pretty common, but I used to think that Jesus Christ was like Swami Shankarananda. First name, last name. And then I was corrected one day and got 2 grades. No, Jesus the Christ. Jesus the Christ. The term Christ has special significance. And Jesus is a person. Now Jesus certainly, we say avatara in the Sanskrit traditions, avatara. Avatara meaning the direct incarnation. And in the case of Jesus, where we hear the law made flesh, or the word made flesh, like the law made flesh, or the word made flesh. And those of us that have read Dr. Holmes, we understand how he brings the concept of the law forward all of the time for us to see that what's at work here really is the law. And so in the same way, the story of Jesus is really our story. It's the story of the hero's journey. And this doesn't mean that Jesus is unreal. Of course Jesus is real. Jesus is as real as anything is here. But his journey and his teaching and what he's offered to us is to show us the way, isn't it? It's not to treat him as something afar. In fact, he was very, very clear with us that we're not to worship him from afar, but we are to pick up our cross and follow him. Yes. And so in this way, this is the significance. And from this perspective, we'd like to talk a little bit about the significance of Easter and this relationship. The first thing that we can consider about Easter, of course, Easter celebrates and I heard it said this way this morning, the resurrection. The resurrection. And I had to look up the word surrection and see what surrection meant. And here's what Webster says, the process of being heaved upwards. So the resurrection, the being heaved upwards back into the highest consciousness, back into the highest state, back into the Lord, back into the Absolute, back into Spirit, as it were. We're in a very funny situation here. It's a very funny, very interesting situation. It's not that we're separate, but there's a question of depth that we deal with. Within us is the hidden God. Within us is the Christ, which means that we are that. Just as Jesus said, "I and the Father are one," which means that we are that. But our situation is that somehow we've forgotten. Somehow we could say lost our way, but it's not so much that as having forgotten. So in a way, this journey, this hero's journey, is a journey of God remembering who I am. Remembering who I am. Or God becoming God in this manifest expression, or us waking up to the fact that we are spirit, that we're not this flesh. And of course, there's nothing wrong with the flesh. Joseph Campbell, and some perhaps have heard of the great Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell made much of his work, his life's work, related to bringing forth this symbolism that Jung spoke about in the hero's journey. Joseph Campbell says this about the crucifixion, and by the way, not for nothing, in this human experience, we tend to relate to the story of the crucifixion as something bad, and the resurrection as something good. Have you noticed that? And so we tend not to talk about the crucifixion, but you might have noticed that there's no springtime without winter. And that in fact what we deal with is a cycle of life, not a stop, not an end. In this case, the crucifixion has great significance, but there's no possibility for resurrection without crucifixion, and that's really the story that Jesus shows us. We came across just in doing a little bit of research, checking in. We came across a quote from Jesus, which I had never heard before. I know I had read it, but I'd never heard it before. Jesus spoke of the crucifixion, the coming crucifixion, in this way. He said, "But I have a baptism to be baptized with, and what a constraint I am under until it is accomplished." That's Luke. That might sound a little bit freaky, but what it says is he was looking forward to it because he was constrained. Why was he constrained? You know, in our limited state, we tend to not see the spirit that's inherent. We tend to see each other not as spirit, not as soul, is it so? But we tend to see each other as a name and a form. When Jesus spoke, and it's the same when Dr. Ernest Holmes speaks. Dr. Holmes doesn't forget that he's one with the Christ. He doesn't forget. And when they speak, we imagine that it's this body somehow that's speaking. But this body has no power to speak in and of itself. This body only speaks under the motivation of spirit. And the words that are formed are only through the intelligence. And neither of these are individual attributes. We might say one thing, we might disagree, but that which is underlying the speech is one, and it is the Christ. We remember that Jesus said, "You can do nothing without me." And so this is the Christ speaking. We tend to think that when these greats open their mouths, that they're speaking as a limited being, but in fact, they've surrendered. They've given up the individuality. They've given up the association with this body. They've given up the notion that I am this body, and they've accepted the truth that I am spirit. And in doing so, they've allowed themselves to be an instrument of spirit. An instrument in the hands of spirit. And so it is for Jesus the Christ, so it is for Dr. Ernest Holmes, so it is for the Buddha, so it is for Krishna, so it is for the Prophet Muhammad, so it is for Moses. So they've given up. And to give up the idea of being the flesh is to accept a kind of death, a glorious kind of death, which is a death of the ignorance which had ruled us, and an awakening of the wisdom that I am not this limited being. And this is really the significance of the event. What Joseph Campbell says about the crucifixion is this. He says, if we think of the crucifixion only in historical terms, we lose the symbol's immediate reference to ourselves. Each of us face death. And each of us have the opportunity within this frame of life. Each of us have the choice as to what will die. Will the flesh die, or will the idea that I am the flesh die? Does that make sense? Will the flesh die, or will the idea that I am the flesh die? Peace Pilgrim. How many have heard of Peace Pilgrim? Beautiful. Our dear Ashira is starting a circle here shortly, early May, reading from Peace Pilgrim's book. I highly recommend. Peace Pilgrim is a modern saint, very American saint, by the way. She didn't speak some foreign language to the English speakers, and she spoke so very simply. There's in the documentary about her life and her work, a dear friend of hers had pressed her for a secret near the end of her time with us. And he kept saying, come on, you have to have a secret. I want to hear what's your secret. And she said finally, well, I have one secret. And the secret is that a long, long time ago, I utterly died to myself. Crucifixion is something that we choose. It's not something that's done to us. And I know it sounds odd and it might sound heretical, but if you look at the story of Jesus, you see that he chose it. Do you suppose he had the power to stop it? Yes? Or did he see that it was essential, that it was necessary in order to help us to see our own way out of this madness, out of this materialistic, worldly life where we take everything to be separate and there are problems everywhere, and there are troublemakers everywhere, and the fear is ruling us, and the anger rises up within us, and we scream at our brothers and sisters. And we feel the need to get something here in order to be full and complete. And in this place, we suffer terribly. And it's necessary for us to see that we are whole and complete, that we are full, that we're not this flesh. The sacrifice, as it were, of Jesus is to show us that we're not this limited body. And just like any teacher, he said, I'll go first, I'll show you. I'll prove it to you in your spirit. I'll show you. And I'll never leave you. And I'll never leave you. That's the Christ. That's the Christ spirit within us. If anyone's ever heard of the great Indian saint, Ramana Maharshi. Ramana Maharshi, and he's a great, in the traditions, in the Eastern traditions, called a great Vedanta, one who just like Jesus teaches the nature of truth, and relentlessly so just stays with it and helps to point us to this higher truth of ourselves. Ramana Maharshi, near the end of his physical existence, near the end of his time in the body, had many, many disciples in India, hundreds of thousands, millions of disciples, and many had gathered because his body was just absolutely racked with cancer. And it was clear that his time in the physical form would be over soon. And they were crying, they were wailing, "Oh, dear Bhagavan, don't leave us, please don't leave us." And he looked and he smiled and he said, "How can I go anywhere?" And you see, that's the Christ. That's the Christ. That's the Christ. Jesus is the form, yes. Jesus is the teacher, yes. But the Christ is eternal. The Christ is Allah. These are names. The Christ is Spirit. The Christ is Bhagavan. The Christ is the Father. I and the Father are one. The Christ is you. And the Christ is me. It's the reality. It's the place where we meet. It's the peace within us. It's the joy that we seek. It's the joy that we seek. And the joy is always here. The joy is not what we thought it was, It's not some isolated, separate happiness where I'm happy and you're unhappy. The joy is where we share together and we cry together and we laugh together. But we know that we're not separate. And we share. And we enjoy this life together. Whether we're experiencing sorrow in the moment or we're experiencing happy in the moment. We don't forget. Don't forget, this is the awakening of the Christ within us. This is the recognition, the resurrection, the coming back into. And the only thing necessary for it, and this is the hardest for us, the only thing necessary for us is to choose the time and place of our death. And here we don't talk about physical. You see, Jesus chose it. Jesus would never say that Judas was a bad person. He would never say. He would say he played his role. It was a necessary role, yes? It's part of the story that had to be. It's part of the awakening that needed to be demonstrated, that we needed to see. It's not that there's a bad guy in the story. You see, Christ was never dead, yes? And Jesus showed us this. And this is the real message of Easter. The real message of Easter is life, the fullness of life, the wholeness of life, the connectedness of life, the divinity of life. Yes? And we are the life, and we are the life, just as Jesus said, "I am the resurrection and the life. I am that which resurrects." Yes, I am that which resurrects. Is it so? Can we see the same within us? I am that eternal. I am that eternal. And I am yearning to be free. Yes, I'm yearning to be free. And wanting to explode out of this limited idea. I'm wanting to be free of it. And this, and in Sanskrit, this wanting to, I gotta be free of this. This is called mumukshutva, or the longing for liberation. And this is what Jesus wants of us. He wants us to see it and get it and long. What does he say? Pick up your cross and follow me. What does that mean? Crucify ourselves. Oh, but only the limited, only that which is temporal could ever die. Only that which is non-eternal could ever die. That which is eternal could never die. And you are eternal beings. You're not limited beings. You are eternal. You've never been born. You've never died. You are eternal. And it's this eternal nature that's wanting to be revealed. It's wanting to be reveled in. It's wanting to be known. And this is the meaning of Easter for us. It's the demonstration and acceptance. And then Jesus also spoke to, on the cross, he spoke to the way. On the cross, he spoke to the way. I love the bit of preparation. I brought some things forward here that are just wanting to be shared. We understand that there were 7 words or 7 sayings of Jesus on the cross. And there's a special significance. We're told that there's a special significance, and perhaps we can see it. In his time on the cross, in his hours on the cross, he said, first, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And then he said, "Verily I say unto you, today shalt thou be with me in paradise." And then, "Woman, behold thy son, and behold thy mother." And And then, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. Lord, Lord, why have you left me so? And then I thirst. It is finished. And Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. This is really this process of dying to the ignorance, selecting it, awakening to the real. Here are the concepts given, shared with us in terms of what this is. And you will see them perhaps as steps. Father, forgive them is forgiveness. So we begin by forgiving ourselves and forgiving everyone. The only thing we've ever suffered from is ignorance. Anything we've ever done has never been malicious, it's only been from lack of understanding. What we call the most heinous sin is only that which separates us from God, from truth. And since we are eternal beings, no sin has ever really affected us. Nothing anyone has done has ever really affected us. So let it go, let it be, forgive. That's the first step. Salvation. Verily I say unto you, today shalt thou be with me in paradise. So recognizing the essential nature and making that commitment to the essential nature. I am thine, all is thine. Salvation. Relationship. Woman, behold thy son and behold thy mother. So relationship. And then abandonment. Giving up on holding on to the flesh vehicle as the reality of ourselves. So abandoning it, letting it go. That's a preparation, The winter time is a time of abandonment of the forms, abandoning this desire to hold on to and finally letting go. And then I thirst, distress, and this is bound to come. When one abandons, when one lets go, distress will come, it will arise, some fear will come, and then triumph. And this is the hero's journey. This is really the hero's journey. It's finished. It's done. I am not this. And then reunion. Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. Reunion. So perhaps we can celebrate together this hero's journey. And perhaps we can take limit ourselves. It's the hardest thing we'll ever do. We were having a conversation yesterday. Chandika and I were driving out, and I forget exactly the subject, but the great Indian phrase, what to do? Okay. What to do? I don't know if you've heard it. What to do? The letting go of the last of these notions of being this fleshly instrument, and really imbibing, I am spirit, you and I are one, and I'm going to practice being one with you. No matter what you say, no matter what you do, I'm going to practice being one with you. And dear Lord, you're not apart from me, I understand you're within me and you're without me, and I'm going to practice being in union with you. In Sanskrit, it's called nididhyasana, or practicing the truth. And in practicing the truth, we become one with the truth. As Dr. Holmes would say, we are the truth already. But we learn to change the mindset to one that's in alignment with the truth. It's the hardest thing we'll ever do, but it has merit. And it's why we came here. It's why we took this form, is to not just be spirit, but also to become spirit once again. To recognize and to resurrect in this form, in this world, as the light, in this world, shining brightly, as we're asked to do. So let's just take a moment in silence, if we could, and recognize and appreciate all of the teachers. There's a Sanskrit mantra, I'll chant, and I'll explain the meaning. It's very short, and it's very fitting for this. And the mantra is this: Asato ma satgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityur ma mritam gamaya. Dear Lord Christ, Spirit. Take me from darkness to light. Take me from death to immortality. I beseech thee. And we can all say this. We can pick up the cross willingly and take this difficult journey back into the light. And we support each other certainly on this journey. So much gratitude and so much love. God bless us, everyone.
And so